Slider Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Glad you're here. Let me give a quick preview for what we got coming up on Friday. We got our big China special. We're going to talk military. We're going to talk economy, talk about monetary policy. We're going to get really deep in the weeds with that, just so we can really understand what's happening there. We'll talk about supply chains when it comes to the economic aspect of it as well. And China's Silk Road project, their China 2025, 2050 vision, and what they're doing in Africa, what they're doing in Antarctica. So just get a big picture and pretty detailed analysis of what's happening in China. That's coming up on Friday. Really excited for that show. Speaking of China, we'll do a little coronavirus update here right now. Still operating. I'm still operating on the premise that the fear of the coronavirus is likely to be as or more destructive than the virus itself. That's still the operating premise, subject to change. It's an interesting moment we're in. Because I'm not sure what percentage of people are aware. I don't know what percentage of people have decided and will never change their mind no matter what, that coronavirus is no big deal. And they've concluded it's no big deal and it will always be no big deal. I have a hunch that it's probably 40% of people. I think that's a lot, right? 40% of people, I think, believe it's completely overblown and no big deal whatsoever. And then there's also a percentage of people that are on the other side who think we're all going to die, right? Now, that's not me. I'm not either of those. My position for now is I think the virus is pretty bad. It could be much, much worse. I'm grateful it's not, but pretty bad. And I think governments are going to react with a heavy hand and a heavier hand as this goes on. And that's what you need to prepare for. And I hope I'm clear on that. So on the spectrum, so over here, you have no big deal, stop talking about it later. And then over on this other extreme, you have maybe this doctor. This is Richard Hatchett from the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. Here's what he says.
I've been working on epidemic preparedness for about 20 years, and completely dispassionately, without elevating the temperature or speaking hyperbolically. This is the most frightening disease I've ever encountered in my career, and that includes Ebola, it includes MERS, it includes SARS. And it's frightening because of the combination of infectiousness and a lethality that appears to be many-fold higher than flu.
So you're with me on the spectrum, right? So some people, no big deal, totally overblown, it's nothing. And then this guy, worse than Ebola, SARS, MERS. Okay, so that's the one, let's call that guy a 10. It's 1 to 10. Maybe less than that is Michael Osterholm. He's, I don't know, maybe he'd be like an 8. He's the author of a book called Deadliest Enemy, Our War Against Killer Germs. He was on Rogan's podcast the other day. Here's what he says about it.
So from this perspective, I can understand why people would say, well, wait a minute, flu kills a lot more itself every year than this does. And I remind people this is just the beginning. Probably the best guesstimate we have right now on what limited data we have would say this is going to be at least 10 to 15 times worse than the worst seasonal flu year we see. 10 to 15 times worse in terms of fatalities? Yeah, and just illness. In fact, I brought some numbers. We conservatively estimate that this could require 48 million hospitalizations, 96 million cases actually occurring, over 480,000 deaths that can occur over the next 3 to 7 months with this situation. So this is not one to take lightly.
Yeah, okay. Usually about 60,000 flu deaths, and he's talking almost 500,000, right? That's pretty serious. So that's why I give that analysis. I don't even know if I'm on board with that yet, to be honest. I don't even know if I think it's going to be that bad. I mean, what would I really know, right? But we'll call that guy an 8. So if that's an 8, I'm a 5.5 on my made-up scale. I'm concerned virus-wise more for my mom, right? She's over the age of 70. She had a couple trips planned. She probably won't do them. Personally, I'm not concerned about my family and the virus. And I'm also not that concerned about my family and forced quarantines because we're prepared. We have what we need. And if nothing else comes out of this whole virus thing, maybe it can just be a good kick in the pants to do what you know you need to do and what you know you should have done a long time ago when it comes to preparing for any natural disaster or something like this. Let me say one thing to the people who have decided it's not a big deal and have decided not to change their minds in light of any evidence whatsoever that comes to light. First, it's not my job to convince you, and do whatever you want. But if I may suggest the possibility that two different things can be true at the same time. I think the number one argument for people who say it's overblown, and if you remember the first segment we ever did on this, like late January probably, I was in that camp. I was like, oh, please, this is nothing. It's just like Ebola, just like SARS, like it was a big, nothing, right? I was totally in that camp. And I also made the argument that the media is going to use this coronavirus to take down Trump. Actually, I made 2 points. I said the media is going to do two things. They're going to hype it up to make money, right? They're gonna sensationalist headlines and exaggerated stories, all to make money off of clicks and all that. And the media is going to use coronavirus to make the president look bad and try to take down Trump before the election, make it his Katrina, right? I believe that's still true, and this virus could actually be a big deal. Does that make sense? Both of those can be true. So it doesn't have to be, hey, the media is using this to take down Trump, therefore it's not a big deal. It doesn't have to be that. It can be, hey, the media is using this to take down Trump, and, oh, it's actually a big deal too. It can be both of those at the same time. And we can do a little bit of this. I don't really want to. I think some of it's kind of important, but some of it's also kind of a waste of time. But to talk about the ways that the media is just a bunch of hacks when it comes to this stuff, and pitting stuff on Trump unfairly, and trying to take him down, and trying to make it his Katrina, and being a little bit gleeful when things go poorly, like the media is definitely doing that. And it's also kind of a big deal too. So that's that. Yesterday, we talked about how no mayor wants to go first. No mayor, no governor wants to be first. No mayor wants to be the first to shut their city down because there's no incentive to do it. There's actually an incentive to not act quickly with quarantines, because even when the quarantine works and it stops the spread of the virus, then people are going to come back and say, oh, see, that was totally unnecessary. What a waste of time. What a waste of money. Thanks for nothing. You shut down my business. I couldn't go to this wedding. We couldn't do this. Couldn't go to work. And for nothing. And that's what people are going to say, missing the point that it was the quarantine that stopped the spread of the virus itself. If there were no quarantines, then things would most likely be much, much worse. So that's why it's a difficult decision for mayors to make, because it's almost a disincentive to do what is the right thing and do these mass quarantines, as difficult as it is, right? So Cuomo, so the point was, no one wants to be first. Well, Governor Cuomo was the first to blink with his new containment zone that he announced yesterday in New Rochelle. New Rochelle is just outside New York City. So it's a 1 mile diameter circle. I don't know if it's a radius or diameter. I think diameter circle. And inside that circle, everything's canceled. So it canceled all public gatherings, all the schools, Boys and Girls Club, all groups like that. I don't know to what lengths yet, we just started, but I don't know what lengths the quarantine efforts are. Like, are they mandating everyone stay in their house? Don't know, like, the levels of that. We're gonna talk a little bit in the next segment about what China has done. They license one person per dwelling to leave at a certain number of times per week, and we'll show that license and talk about that a little more. But my point here is that Cuomo was the first. And because Cuomo was the first to do a containment zone, we're going to see a lot more of it, right? The dominoes are going to start to fall. So 2 questions. Are you prepared for coronavirus? All right, wash your hands. I think the more pressing, and don't touch your face. The more pressing, I think I've done it 10 times so far this show, but the more pressing question is, are you prepared to be placed in a containment zone by the state enforced by the National Guard? Right. I almost touched my face, seriously. I just did there. Ah! I am almost certain that quarantining will happen. As soon as one person in a school district or a business gets coronavirus, then everything shuts down. Oh, did you hear this one? The TSA has three TSA agents at the San Jose airport test positive for coronavirus. What in the world do you do with that? What do you do with TSA agents with coronavirus? And now this is also knowing that we've tested very few people. Like I've heard some counts that we've tested less than 7,000 people in the entire country. And we know out of those 7,000 that have been tested, we know that 3 of them are TSA agents at a single airport. And what do you do knowing that those are the people who touch everyone, right? They touch everyone who walks through the metal detectors, and they touch people's bags all day long. And then those people go and they get on the plane and they fly around the world, blah, 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 right? Like, that's bad. You don't want TSA agents coming down with this. How long have they had it? We don't know, and that's what I'm saying. That's why this stuff is going to get much, much worse. Glenn Reynolds, he's a law professor at UT Knoxville. And he had a good line here. He said, we face a variant of the old medical adage that in the early stage, see if this makes sense. In the early stage, diseases are easy to treat, but hard to diagnose. In the later stages of a disease, it's easy to diagnose, but hard to treat. Right? That makes sense? And right now, things are not bad enough in America. And we talked yesterday about how things are bad in Italy and Iran, but that's like a movie when we watch that. It doesn't seem like that's real, or it could come over here. So things aren't bad enough here to make closing everything the obvious thing to do. But the problem with that is by the time things get that bad, it'll be too late. And the closings won't do that much good because there'll already be all the TSA agents with coronavirus, for instance. There's a thought out there, and this is probably worth expanding on a little bit more, that the Silicon Valley is ahead of the rest of the country when it comes to this, because we talked 2 weeks ago about Amazon and Facebook and Microsoft in Washington and in Silicon Valley shutting down their offices way before anyone else. So we're going to talk, maybe we can do this in the next segment. We'll talk a little more about why Silicon Valley was ahead of the rest of the country. But I bring this up because if you own a business, this is going to be a really tough time for you coming up here. I don't own a business, so it's tough. Take this for a grain of salt. But if you think you're going to shut down or self-quarantine your office eventually, it's probably better to do it sooner rather than later, because once people actually get sick, your losses are probably going to be even worse. But again, just like the mayors, it's a really, really tough decision to make. And I get it. If you're a business owner right now, it's going to be bad, depending on what business, of course. My Patriot Supply is going to be doing pretty good, but some businesses are not going to go good. And I don't know if people are prepared for this. The doctor in that Joe Rogan podcast that we played, he said this new normal, there will be a new normal. We're not there yet, but there will be a new normal. It's going to last about 3 to 6 months. I think we're about 2 weeks from all this happening, by the way. Probably a little less than 2 weeks from that hitting point, right? So you got a little bit more time to prepare, not much longer. But we're going to be in this new normal when it happens for 3 to 6 months. I heard from someone who runs a concert venue. That's not good. That's going to be devastating to his business. Read something, a music DJ, he lost $12,000 in bookings over just the last 48 hours. I have 3 speeches planned in the next 3 weeks here. 2 of them different parts of the country, got to get on planes. I'm not sure if they're taking place. So I'm going to lose a little bit of money. It's not a big deal, but they're for charities. And they're going to lose potentially a lot of money in donations, right? So there's a ton of stuff like that that's going to be canceled and affected. And there's going to be a lot of people criticizing. So it's tough. It's such a tough scenario. This is Dr. Fauci, right? So remember Dr. Fauci? This is the guy who last week all the media hacks said, the president's muzzling Dr. Fauci. Where is Dr. Fauci? And Dr. Fauci was standing right next to the president. And Dr. Fauci went to the podium and was like, I'm not being muzzled. Stop it. I'm right here. So here's the newly released from underground bunker, Dr. Fauci.
But what I want to talk to you about today, just for a moment or two, is that we would like the country to realize that as a nation, we can't be doing the kinds of things we were doing a few months ago. That it doesn't matter if you're in a state that has no cases or 1 case. You have to start taking seriously what you can do now, that if and when the infections will come, and they will come, sorry to say, sad to say, they will. But when you're dealing with an infectious disease, you always have that metaphor that people talk about, that Wayne Gretzky, he doesn't go where the puck is, he's going where the puck is going to be. Well, we want to be where the infection is going to be, as well as where it is.
So get ready for that. I hear that. I don't know if you're in the same, but I hear that and I'm annoyed because maybe it's not necessary. And it's definitely going to hurt a lot of people. The quarantining will. And I get annoyed because I wish this wasn't the case, obviously, but it's going to be the case. And I don't think we can stop governments from instituting these quarantines. And my only message here, it's my only point, it's a long way of saying this. I'm going to say it every day. Prepare for it. Prepare for the quarantining. Because when you're quarantined for a few weeks in a containment zone, Do you want to get your food from the National Guard, rations, or do you want to be safe in your home? We'll take a break. We'll come back. I want to talk about China, their reaction to coronavirus, and the government and cultural differences between China and America that, this pains me to say, and I'll give context to it next, but China may be in a better place than we are. I'll explain next. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. Again, friendly reminder, we have a big special coming up on Friday about China. And how they're awful is pretty much the gist of it. Now, I don't want what I'm about to say here to be misconstrued in any way whatsoever as praise for the Chi-Coms. Okay, we got the special coming up on Friday. We're going to talk about how they're the worst and maybe probably our biggest enemy in the world for many different ways and many different ways. We're going to break all that down on Friday. Because I'm with you. But there is a reality to their government that is in contrast to ours. This is some insight from Nicholas Christakis. This is the guy who left Yale because he said that people should wear whatever Halloween costumes they want, and the students screamed at him and drove him out of Yale University, right? So that's how he's famous, although I'm sure he wants to not be known by that anymore. Anyway, he was talking about how China has, they have the most cases, they have 80,000, but the numbers have dropped. They used to have hundreds of new cases per day, a month ago, to now about 50 cases per day. And in a country of 1.4 billion people, that's pretty amazing. So here's what Nicholas wrote. He said, "This is an astonishing achievement from a public health point of view. We can get a sense of how strong something is by getting a sense of what sort of force is required to stop it, to borrow a Newtonian physics metaphor. Coronavirus requires a powerful force to stop. This is clear from the Chinese response. Of course, here's the key, China has a collectivist culture and an authoritarian government, both of which have allowed this enormous widespread response. China, is well suited to fight a pandemic." Okay? So China is a collectivist culture and an authoritarian government. We, in America, we are an individualistic culture in a free country, which is great 99.99999% of the time in 99.99% of circumstances, not great during a pandemic. Again, I don't want to be like, oh, Slater's all for the communism. I got a sign right there, right on the other side. Boom, it's giant live free or die sign. Okay, I'm all in on the live free or die. But there's that one thing, the global pandemic is the one where it's like, ooh, the Chinese may be a little better than this. Because it's a trade-off, as always. Because they forced almost 1 billion people to stay at their home. I mean, look, we got some pictures of China. Look at this place. Look at this. Look at China. I don't know who those two people are, but look at this like massive superhighway, right? So they could shut the place down. Here's what Nick said. He said, he's Nick, like I'm tight with Nicholas Christakis, the professor. "The imposition of such public health measures on such a scale for such a duration has never been seen before. Some areas, 6 weeks of quarantine. Movement of people and vehicles are checked with an exit-entrance permit. Body temperature at entrance of community is checked. Disinfection of vehicles, food delivery, permits for only one person per household to go out." The government gave people licenses. Do we have a picture of the license? A license to allow people to go anywhere, to leave their house. And the license says in Chinese, it is everybody's responsibility to fight this virus. So the point is they went, there it is. So they went hard because they can, because they're communists. And because of all that quarantine in China, the cases dropped from 3.8. So maybe you hear these numbers. Anything above a 1. So a 1 means if one person gets it, they spread it to another person. They spread it to one other person. If the number's 3.8, it means if one person gets it, then they give it to 3.8 people, and then each of those give it to 3. Right? And it goes like that. The virus in China went from 3.8 down to what we think is a 0.32. So anything below 1 means it'll just extinguish on its own, right? So things might be getting better in China. Now, you can't trust the commies, which we'll talk about on Friday again, right? But we do know that they're lifting some restrictions. Here's a picture of an elevator, and you can see there's tape on it. So only 4 people are allowed in an elevator at a time. It's marked off by the different quadrants. And there's a sign outside of every elevator. It says, "Let's unite together to fight the virus in this special period." So they're lifting some things, but obviously they still have some of that. Last quote here from the professor. China has a collectivist culture and an authoritarian government. So its success fighting COVID-19, while deeply impressive, will not be easy to reproduce elsewhere. The USA must prepare to combat the virus using tools at its disposal, our disposal. It will not be easy. So when the Chinese government tells a Chinese subject to stay in your home, they do it because they know if they don't, they get shot in the head. And also their culture is just to follow the orders of the government, right? The United States, when the United States government tells me to stay in my home, what are you kidding me? You can't tell me what to do. I darn well go where I please, when I please. That's like, at 99.99% of the time, that's awesome. I appreciate and encourage that reaction. If the government tells you what to do, grab your guns, you ain't telling me nothing. Probably not great during a pandemic. Probably not, that's not the best reaction. This 0.01% of time. You with me on this? Eric, can you grab my live free or die sign? You mind giving that for a second? I just want to prove. I mentioned the sign. I talked a big game about the sign, and then I'm not going to pull through on the sign. So this is, Charles Krauthammer. Charles Krauthammer, great conservative thinker. There it is. About this baby. That's what I'm talking about. Live free or die. All right? Okay? Walk the walk, Eric. I walk the walk. Yeah, we can. Charles Krauthammer passed away a couple years ago. By the way, that was my wife said I can hang that in the garage. Those were the orders. I bought it in New Hampshire. And she said, "What'd you get?" I said, "I got this." And I said, "I'm going to put it in the house." And she said, "In the garage." All right, I'll take it. So Charles Krauthammer went to Harvard Medical School. Back in 2014, he talked about Ebola. And this is what he said. He said, in the face of a unique, again, and I want to emphasize a conservative guy, right? He said, in the face of a uniquely dangerous threat, we Americans have trouble recalibrating our traditional and laudable devotion to individual rights and civil liberties. We got to recalibrate. I'm uncomfortable even talking this. That is our fundamental reason why we've been so slow in getting serious about Ebola. I don't want to recalibrate. We Americans, we rightly believe in privacy. We see that with the person at CPAC, right? There's someone who had coronavirus at CPAC, and they won't tell us who it is. So if you were there, you don't know if you shook hands with that person or whatever. So how many other people might be infected and not know it, and we won't know, and we don't know because of privacy. And we have a high value on privacy, right? HIPAA and all that stuff, right? We don't like forced quarantines, right? That doesn't, that's just live free or die. You're gonna tell me what to do. That's a violation of our civil liberties, right? You're gonna keep me in my house, like house arrest? I haven't even committed a crime. Krauthammer said that. He says, having committed no crime, having done no wrong, you are sentenced to house arrest or banishment. It's unfair, it's un-American. But when an epidemic threatens, we do it because we must. I don't think this will happen for this coronavirus. It could have with Ebola, which is a little more like you get it and you're bad news. But with a serious thing like that, there were thoughts about evacuations. So you don't treat Ebola patients in the local hospital. You evacuate them to like a military base or something. I don't think that's going to happen here. But either way, we don't like that, of course. In normal circumstances, we want maximum privacy and freedom. And here's Krauthammer, a great line. He said, President Obama, in his messianic period, declared that choosing between security and liberty was a false choice. But on the contrary, it is the eternal dilemma of every free society. And politics is the very process of finding some equilibrium between these two competing values. Really, really good. It's easy for China to find their balance. No privacy, no freedom. Done. Right? In America, we got to figure that out. And we got to figure it out quick. Coming up next, we're going to talk to a former congressman from New York, from near this area that's under the containment zone. The first of, I think, the dominoes to fall. And then we'll do that, and then we're going to talk about the primary last night. So we got to give a rundown of that. All coming up. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, just to wrap up our coronavirus talk, I want to go to former Congresswoman Nan Hayworth, who's also a board-certified ophthalmologist. Dr. Hayworth, how are you, ma'am?
I am well, sir. How are you?
Good to talk to you. So, first of all, you got a nice little retweet from the president yesterday. Congratulations there. Let's start there, and then we'll talk about coronavirus in general and the reaction, because you're a former Congresswoman, East Hudson Valley, neck of the woods. I grew up in Syracuse, by the way, so we were close to each other. And there's a lot going on there with coronavirus. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's talk big picture politics and how you think the president has responded so far.
I think the president has responded as a superb chief executive. You know, he really, when you consider all of the streams of information that come at him, all of the areas over which he has responsibility, he really has a remarkable mind and terrific instincts. So he has received praise from folks whom you wouldn't necessarily even expect to be extending compliments, including the Democratic governors of Washington State, California, New York. They've all said positive things about the president, as have many others, including an incredible team of experts. So the president's instincts have been superb on this. His early action, which was derided particularly strongly by presidential aspirant former VP Joe Biden, the president's action to close off travel, to restrict travel from affected areas, from China in particular, has proven to be prescient in giving us an advantage over the spread of this virus. So I think the president's done a superb job.
Yeah, that definitely cutting off travel from China was an amazing call and definitely helped us a lot. What would you, and like, he's in a no-win, right? Whatever he does, there's always people going to criticize him, whatever. But how would you characterize, because some people are going to say he hasn't done enough, he's downplaying it too much. Some people are saying he's doing too much by cutting off travel right when that happened. So where would you put him on like the spectrum of heavy-handed on one side and too light on the other?
I would say really, truly, Mike, he's hitting just right. And a lot of that is because, number one, of his very sound instincts, and his analytical abilities. You know, he's taking in all this information. He is then working very willingly and enthusiastically with a team of the world's best experts on this kind of challenge. And Johns Hopkins University's Center for the Study of Pandemics has said that the United States is the most prepared for a pandemic. We have a Department of HHS, CDC, FDA, National Institutes of Health, you know, all of these remarkable experts, and Ambassador Deborah Birx, who was an Obama appointee, who's an HIV/AIDS expert, who was our worldwide ambassador in combating that disease. The president has surrounded himself with people who are capable of doing what is wise and prudent and balancing a lot of information coming at them very fast. This is a significant public health threat. And in a country like the United States, where we enjoy a lot of freedoms and our citizens enjoy a lot of freedoms, there's a lot of balancing to do between citizens' expected liberties and the control of a disease threat that doesn't care about those kinds of things.
That's so well said. First, the most important thing of a leader, I think, is the ability to delegate. And a lot of people criticize the president for delegating this to Pence, but Pence is also, as you mentioned, doing a great job delegating this to the experts around. Because people are like, oh, Pence, what does he know about infectious diseases? And it's like, well, he's not the expert, but he's going to delegate properly to the people who know. We were just quoting Charles Krauthammer, actually. He was writing about Ebola back in 2014, and he mentioned that's the thing you said, like, we gotta balance liberty and security all the time, but especially at a time like this, that's hard to do. You as a former congresswoman, like, how do you think through that? And then I want to talk to you as a doctor, but you as a former congresswoman, how do you think through the balance of liberty and security during a pandemic?
Right. Well, and you've seen this in the Trump administration's response, led from the president and going on down. They have provided lots of information to our citizens about how they can protect themselves, right? I mean, it does start with us exercising common sense, and certainly I embrace this as a doctor. There are simple common sense things that we can all do. This virus enters our bodies through the nose, mouth, throat. Our eyes are also connected to that, speaking as an ophthalmologist. So keeping hands away from your face, unless they've immediately previously been cleaned, watching what you eat as well, because you can be exposed through food. If someone's coughing near something you're about to eat, that can also be an issue. So I would add that precaution. And if people are ill, particularly with a cough, fever, anything like that, remaining home, not going to work. And then so that's the personal behavior side. And then from the government side, providing the kind of supports that folks need as citizens and in entire industries, providing the kind of economic assistance that is being talked about from the administration level. They're leading that, starting with potentially something like a payroll tax holiday that will, and supports for people who have to stay home from work because they are self-quarantining, basically. Support for industries, especially in travel and hospitality, providing the kinds of reassurance that everybody's going to get through this, and that's something the government can do. And of course, obviously, all of the ways in which government departments from the Health and Human Services side are providing epidemiologically in speeding testing and therapies and vaccines.
Yeah, gosh, bailouts are a dirty word. And you talking about it here is really the first time I've given much thought to that. And there'll be time to really have that conversation. But that's got to be a thing, because this could be very devastating to businesses.
Yes, and this is a very different thing from the government-made crisis in 2008. That 2008 collapse in the financial services industry was a result of a wicked combination between really misguided, misdirected government regulation and an industry that took full advantage of that opportunistically, because that's what people do. This crisis is a natural disaster, in essence. I mean, it's a natural disaster of a particular type, but a very different picture. This is not the fault, if you will, of anybody other than, arguably the very disadvantageous and, infection promoting conditions where the virus originated in China. But it's certainly not Americans' fault.
Great point. Yeah, there's no moral hazard here. You, we can put both hats on here, doctor and congresswoman. If you were still there, what would it show? Because the first sort of, I don't like this word, but like domino to fall when it comes. No mayor, we mentioned this yesterday, no mayor or governor wants to be the first to shut down a city.
Right.
But what the governor did is kind of the first, starting this quarantine. What would need to be the case in order to make a quarantine zone or a containment zone? What conditions would need to be there for you? Okay, this is the time.
Yeah. It's a great question, Mike. I don't fault Governor Cuomo for setting up a containment zone around what does seem to be an epicenter for contagion, if you will. The community there, unfortunately, has a lot of folks who apparently harbor the virus. Let's see how that works. I think widespread mass quarantine measures are not warranted right now. But you know what? This is a really fluid situation. On the one hand, Mike, we know that in a crude way, quarantine can work. It is a way of trying to prevent human contact that spreads this virus. We know it does spread through human contact. So there is that. But as you pointed out, this is a significant impediment on our liberties and it does have potentially very significant economic consequences, not just on certain industries, but whole populations. So I think it's not something that we need to consider at the moment, and the governor is pursuing this in a very limited way. Let's keep in mind that most Americans who might be exposed to or contract disease based on this virus or from this virus, coronavirus, COVID-19, will survive it. The populations we really worry about are those above the age of 60 and particularly above the age of 80. So I think targeted measures, if you're going toward more severe measures, targeted measures that protect those populations, and of course the immunocompromised, in particular, where we need to go. Nursing home access, for example. I think that's a place where broad limitations might initially be pursued in a more aggressive way.
Yeah, that's fair. That makes a lot of sense. Very good. Dr. Nan Hayworth, former congresswoman for East New York area there. Doctor, let's talk again. Thank you so much.
I'd love to. Thank you, Mike.
True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I forgot there was a primary last night, so we have to talk about that. It's over, right? I don't. And that concludes our show. There's not Biden's the guy. Not much to break down yesterday. We can pretend to make up storylines, but nothing was really close. I'm always looking for the storyline within a state. The media's missing, they're focused on this and they're missing what's going on in Washington. You need to look. Oh, there was something that was kind of interesting, I guess, big picture. Pull it up here. It was about kids voting. They're not kids. Obviously, 12-year-olds aren't voting. So this is, what is this? This is share of the Democratic primary electorate under the age of 30. And in every state so far, it's been ranging between 10 and Nevada was 17%, but that was a caucus. Caucuses are always a little higher. So in the primaries, it was between 10 and 15% of the voters were under the age of 30. That's brutal. And the big story there is compared to 2016, all those numbers are down in every single state. So North Carolina, it was 18% people under 30, and now it's 14%. Tennessee, 15%, now 11. Texas, 20%, now 15. So that the whole Bernie youth turnout was lower than 2016. Not good if you're a Democrat, not good if you're Biden. So I guess that's one kind of storyline there. But it's over. Florida's next week, and it's going to be hard for Bernie to win Florida on account of his, praising Fidel Castro. So Joe's the guy, and just get ready for videos like this nonstop from Trump's team for the next how many months we have left.
Obama warned Biden's aides to make sure Biden didn't embarrass himself.
My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by the you know the thing. I know I'm a Democrat. Tomorrow's Superstar Tuesday. 150 million people have been killed since 2007 when Bernie voted to exempt the gun manufacturers. This is my little sister, Valerie, and I'm Jill's husband. Oh, no, you switched on me. This is my wife. This is my sister. They switched on me. My other three granddaughters are down in Dubuque with my wife, Jill. And so, in Des Moines, I'm in Dubuque.
All right, Chuck, thank you very much. All right, it's Chris, but anyway.
Play the radio. Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night. Text Joe 23. I got to get this right.
1976, and
You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier. I want to be clear. I'm not going nuts.
So you're going to see a ton of clips like that for the next how many months, and that's glorious. Remember, weeks ago, we talked about how the Democrats have put up as their nominee the guy who actually is who they thought Trump was, right? So there's all this fear-mongering about who they thought Trump was, and he didn't turn out to be any of those things. But now instead, here's 2020, and they, as their Democratic nominee, they put up that guy, right? They always said Trump was angry. 2015, remember how mean and angry he was? And then you have Joe Biden, and we don't have time to play this clip today, but you saw the clip the other day where he's talking to that union worker and swearing at him. like pretty soon Joe Biden's gonna punch someone in the face. Like that's probably gonna happen coming in the campaign. There's talks back about how Trump was so mean. And remember, it's Biden who called that poor college student a dog-faced lying pony monkey or whatever the insult even was, right? And then there's this whole thing about Trump and he's senile. Remember the whole, we need to trigger, his administration needs to trigger the 25th Amendment to remove him from office or whatever. And then they put up their own senile guy. And it's not, I want to be clear, we talked a little bit about this yesterday as well. There's this thing where the Democrats are saying, oh, it's the Trump supporters and conservatives and Republicans are making these unfair attacks against Joe and his cognitive abilities. No, it's not Republicans who started making these claims. Here's a clip from Morning Joe. This was back months ago, because you can see in the bottom of the screen it says something about impeachment hearings, right? So this is months ago, a bunch of Democrats on the Morning Joe team.
There are growing concerns among Democrats, Corinne, in terms of whether he's up for this. As Joe and I was just saying, that the pace is only going to pick up. The campaign has largely, other than these debates, kept him out of a lot of big public moments in the public eye. What are you hearing in terms of Democrats' concerns about whether Joe Biden's simply up for the job?
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that they don't know if he is going to be. This is the folks in my circle, right? The folks who are doing this behind the scenes and wondering, can he do it if he becomes a nominee and he's up against Donald Trump.
This was his opening statement.
Well, look, the next president of the United States is going to have to do two things. Defeat Donald Trump, that's number one. And number two, he's going to have to be able to go into states like Georgia and North Carolina and other places. One, that Donald Trump doesn't want me to be the nominee. That's pretty clear. He held up aid to make sure that while at the same time innocent people in the Donbass are getting killed by Russian soldiers. Secondly, I found out that Vladimir Putin doesn't want me to be president.
All right, so of course, Willie, he's struggling there. He's closing his eyes. He knows he's having trouble finding words. The sentences are jumbled. The words are jumbled. But I just wonder, is the media grading Joe Biden on a scale? Are we afraid to say that a lot of his sentences don't make sense, that he's having trouble completing thought?
So that was the Morning Joe team a couple months ago, and it was Cory Booker, when he was still in the race, who questioned if Joe Biden was really all there. But right, this is going to be spun as conservatives are attacking Joe Biden, and therefore all old people. No. This was a progressive attack on him. And also the Democrats, the Joe Biden people, they do this excuse, oh, he's had a stutter since he was a child. You're making fun of the disabled or something. It's like, no, this has nothing to do with having a stutter. And as I think the first person said in that clip, Joe's handlers said that they have been and they are going to continue to try to limit his public appearances. That's not good. You can't win an election that way. You need to court attention at all costs. Trump knows that. That's what he did in 2016. That's what he's going to continue to do here coming up in 2020. That's Trump's biggest complaint against Mitt Romney, other than Mitt Romney walks like a penguin and ruined his carpets during a fundraiser. His third biggest complaint is that he says Mitt Romney disappeared. So he says, where'd he go? Where'd he go? Well, Mitt Romney disappeared, right? Because he wasn't courting attention. Trump knows that that's essential, and Joe Biden's team is trying to limit his public appearances. It's not going to work. We got to go here. Let me say one quick thing. We don't have time to play it, but you've seen the clip by now where Joe Biden's talking to the union guy about, the union guy says, you're going to take away my guns. And he's like, I'm not going to take away your AR-14s. And it's like, well, yeah, of course you're not going to take away AR-14s. There's no such thing as AR-14s. But that's another example of Joe Biden. Well, that's his stutter. I'm not going to do this pearl clutching thing that I've heard a lot of people do with this, oh, he used bad language, whatever. I like it. I think it's good. I think the whole thing's good. I liked the whole exchange. I liked the union guy kind of getting up in Joe's face, right? Like that takes some cojones to get up there and be like, I don't want you to take away my guns, Joe. Right? And I like Joe Biden kind of going back at him and be like, I'm not going to take away your guns. Right? And I like that back and forth. I think that's pretty good. I'd like to see more of that, actually. Right? That was probably the most real, honest exchange of the entire Democratic primary so far. Right? As opposed to this ridiculous scripted charade nonsense we have up there that we call a debate, right? I'd much rather have union guys going after Joe Biden on the shop floor as opposed to Donna Brazile asking questions to the nominees. So I think more moments like that are actually for the best. We got to go. We have our big China special coming up on Friday. Really, really excited for this. We got some amazing guests lined up. We're going to talk China and military. We're going to talk about their culture. We're going to talk about their economy. We're going to talk about supply chain, monetary policy, all this super important stuff, and stuff that's like, I'm not embarrassed to admit I don't know, right? And if you've ever been like, I don't really know what monetary policy, dollar exchange, I don't really know. We're going to ask all those questions so we can have this firm foundation of knowledge as we move forward. So that's Friday. We're going to be talking about China. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word.